The trouble started for Dell and Liz when he invested money in an oil well that pumped nothing but salt water. After that, it was a cattle breeding operation that produced diseased calves, a Florida orange grove that disappeared into a sinkhole. Finally, he lost so much money she had to sell the jewelry she had inherited from her mother. The brooches, necklaces, and rings Liz liked to call her pretties. "Ah, my pretty," she said, the last time she wore any of her jewelry. She sat at her vanity table and lifted a strand of pearls from its velvet-lined case. She held the strand to her throat and asked Dell to fasten it. He kneeled behind her and worked the delicate clasp with his clumsy fingers. Then he kissed her neck and she drew away in mock annoyance. "Cool it, Buster," she said. "Dinner first, then dessert." Each Saturday for years they had gone to the Top Hat Supper Club and maybe later to Peg's Piano Bar before driving home. Liz sliding over to sit close to Dell, letting her hand come up to stroke the back of his neck. "Imagine," she had said one night, "I'm the age my mother was when she died, 51. I've outlived my looks. Oh, don't try to tell me it isn't so. I need all the help I can get to make myself attractive. Thank God I've got my pretties." There were diamonds and sapphires and emeralds and amethysts. When she finally had to sell them, she told Dell not to worry. Just a string of rotten luck, that was all. Couldn't be helped, chin up. But from time to time, he caught her staring at him, and he saw the heat in her eyes, and he had to look away. One night, he left a window open. It was a window on the front porch near the door, and sometime in the night, he woke and remembered the window and went downstairs to close it. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, the front door opened, and a man stepped inside. Dell's first move was toward him, and the man stumbled backward, turned, and fled. "Get out!" Dell thought he was shouting at the man, but later, with a laugh, Liz told him the only sound from his mouth had been a goofy, guttural lowing, one of the funniest things she had ever heard. "Like a demented cow," she said. "I didn't know what was going on. I thought, what in the world?" She hadn't heard the sound of the door unsticking from its rubber seal, or smelled the reek of cigar smoke clinging to the intruder, or seen his shadowy form fill the door frame as suddenly as a nightmare. Dell wanted to share all those details with her, but the two of them were able to manage such a pleasant what-the-hell mood as they waited for the police, he didn't dare disturb it. So he went along with her kidding that he had left himself open to criminals because of all those letters he wrote to prisoners in New York, Alabama, California, even there in Illinois, to Vandalia and Marion and Menard. He got the convicts' names from pen pal ads in a magazine called Real Time, a tabloid he had discovered when he still worked at the post office. Now he carried on regular correspondence with men named Clifford, Michael, Donald, even though Liz told him it was nutso to think anything he had to say to those jailbirds could possibly matter. She liked to give the convicts nicknames like Honey Boy, Chop. She decided to call the man who had broken into their house Sneaky Pete. "That's not very intimidating," Dell said. "He deserves a scarier name than that." "You were the scary one," she said. "You should have heard yourself mooing your head off. What a scream." She told the story again and again to their friends, even to strangers in restaurants and grocery stores. And when she reached the part about the noise Dell had made, she put her hand on his shoulder or his wrist, and she said in a coaxing voice he loved, "Go on, sweetie, show him how you did it." He threw himself into it, thankful that Liz was being good-humored about the fact that he had left the window open. He made the garbled noise deep in his throat, revised it each time, and turned it into the bellow that would bring the most laughs from those who heard it. "That's it," Liz would say, hugging him. "Oh, sweetie, that's rich." Late one afternoon, on the steps outside the post office, he found a set of keys. His first thought was to pass on by. He was carrying a stack of envelopes he had to mail before the post office closed, And since the break-in and his own complicity in it, he could barely imagine becoming a witness now to someone else's careless mistake. Then he noticed a tarnished whistle on the key ring, the kind a woman might carry for safety. And he got the picture of this woman, frantic, afraid that some lunatic might find her keys and somehow, though the chances were nearly impossible, figure out where she lived. There were no women inside the post office. In fact, there were no customers at all. Dell took a spiral notepad from his shirt pocket, and with the cross ballpoint he had always carried with him on his route, he printed in his neat script, "Found, keys. To claim, call 595-0819. He tacked the note to the bulletin board in the entryway, knowing it wasn't the best way of handling the situation, but the only one that suited him at the time. That night, the phone rang. The man on the other end of the line sounded like one of those late-night talk radio hosts, his voice low-pitched and soothing. "Chief," he said, "I've been trying to get you. 2 hours I've been trying." "There's been a problem here," Dell said, "a screw-up with our phones." "You got a problem, Chief? You fix it. Things are all right now. We're back in the pink. All right for you," the man said, "but me, I'm in Dutch." "Who are you?" Dell asked. "What's this got to do with me?" "Everything, Chief. You've got my keys." For a moment, Dell was disappointed that the owner of the keys wasn't a woman, as he had first imagined, an anxious woman he had planned to reassure by returning her keys. But then he heard something new in the man's voice, a hint of desperation. "Tell me where you live." And he knew the man was in something up to his ears, and that Dell was the one between him and whatever it was. "You're lucky I'm the one who found them," Dell said. "All right, yes, I'm lucky. Now tell me, please, where do you live?" After he hung up the phone, Dell told Liz about the keys and the man who was coming to claim them. "Coming here?" Liz said. "That's right." Dell took the keys from his pocket, tossed them into the air, and caught them. He shook his fist as if he were rattling dice. "We've got what he needs." "A visitor," said Liz. "Goodness, there's been no one but us in this house since the night Sneaky Pete broke in." "We don't need to talk about that anymore," said Dell. "That's ancient history." But it was the first thing she told the man, and she told it all. The part about the window Dell had left open, the goofy noise he had made while Sneaky Pete stepped into their house. They were standing just inside the doorway, and Dell said to her, "He doesn't want to hear that. God, Liz, don't be a pain. He's just here to pick up his keys." "Oh, come on, sweetie," she said. "Let's do it together." She lifted her head, stretched out her neck, and bellowed. "Was it like that, Dell?" "All right," he said. "That's enough." She clapped her hands together and laughed. Then she said to the man, "Isn't that a scream?" The man was thin with a shaved head, just starting to ash over with stubble. There was a bruise on one of his cheekbones, and above it, a streak of blood muddied the white of his eye. He winked that eye at Liz. "Sis, that's fine. I need a good laugh, I tell you. I've been on the skinny side of paradise quite a good little bit." "Trouble?" Liz said. "Sis, like you don't know." It was his wife, he said. One morning she bumped her head on a cabinet door. "Just a tap," he said. She didn't give it another thought. A few weeks later, she's telling me she can hardly see out of her left eye. "Sonny," she tells me, "it's like someone pulled a curtain over half of my eye." Now she's having surgery tomorrow. Detached retina. "All because of a little bump?" Liz said. Sonny nodded. "Like I told you, just a tap." He turned back to Dell and winked. "Life can get strange, can't it, Chief? You think you're just rolling along, and then out of nowhere there's something you didn't expect. Like this joker who broke into your house. He saw that open window and thought he'd take a chance. Now you're all closed in here." "Yes," said Liz. She put her hand on Sonny's arm and gave it a squeeze. "Closed in. That's exactly how I feel." Dell handed the keys to Sonny then, just so Sonny's arm would move and Liz's hand would slip away from it. I was on my way to the hospital. Sonny curled his fingers around the keys. I stopped by the post office to pick up a package. Then I was going to make a stop at the storage unit I keep out on University Drive. Elf storage, Liz said. That's right, said Sonny. The S is missing on the sign. Dell cleared his throat. Why do you need a storage unit? Business, said Sonny. I'm a businessman. Dell knows all about business, Liz said. Don't you, Dell? Dell's an investor. A man with money, Sonny said. Money? Said Liz. Dell's thrown it away by the fistfuls. Sonny put the keys in his pocket, then reached out his hand to Dell. Put her there, he said. Chief, this is your lucky night. His business, as Sonny explained it, involved wrapping people with bandages. Head to foot, he said. Even your face, just like a mummy. It's all done with these plastic bandages soaked in a special mineral solution. Forgive me for not revealing the ingredients, but I can't give away my secret. The objective of the wrap was to reduce fat cells and the toxins and fluid around them, squeezing out the poison. When my wife had it done in California, she lost 14 inches all around. I'm going to call my salon Suddenly Slender. Dell could remember as a kid, standing in a doorway, stretching his arms out to the sides and pressing against the jamb until his muscles gave out and started to tingle. When he stepped back, his arms, which he could no longer feel, lifted into the air as if they were filled with helium. Now he could imagine the body wrap Sonny had described, the tight bandages and the incredible lightness customers would feel once they were released. This can be a real moneymaker, Dell said. You got that right, said Sonny. This is gonna be killer. That is, if my wife doesn't kill me first. Since yesterday, she had lain in a hospital bed, only on her right side, so the corner of her retina and her left eye could fold back into place before surgery. She's been waiting for me, and now I'm afraid she's never gonna believe why I'm late. Why wouldn't she believe you? Dell said. Long story. Let's just say I've been late before. The thing about this detached retina is it's my chance to finally prove I can be dependable. Oh, we could help you, Liz said. We could go to the hospital with you and Dell could tell your wife how he found your keys. Would you do that, Chief? Sure. Liz moved over to Dell and slipped her arm around his waist. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him on the forehead. Won't you, Dell? Dell kissed Liz on the cheek and tasted the oil of her makeup. Glad to, he said. Sure thing. Whatever I can do to help. Sonny's panel truck, an old Ford Econoline, was parked in front of Dell and Liz's house. The street light was shining through the windshield, and Dell could see a pair of panties, baby blue lace, hanging from the rearview mirror. The top of the dashboard was littered with tools, screwdrivers, pliers, a carpet knife. Liz was chattering away, talking too loudly, the way she had to the police officer the night of the break-in. Dell can tell your wife about the keys, she said, and then I'll explain the problem with the phone. Dell could see she had concocted this plan, both of them working together to help smooth things out between Sonny and his wife. It was this kid, Dell tried to explain. He was one-ringing us, being a pest. So you were being a snob. No, Dell said, we just wanted some quiet. Now I'm in Dutch. Sonny slapped the side of the panel truck. All because you were a stuck-up SOB. God damn it, Chief, you've put me in a spot. Don't worry, Liz told him. Calm down. We're gonna help you. We're gonna get in our car right now, Dell and me, and we're gonna follow you to the hospital and we're gonna take care of everything. Okay, said Sonny. Right. You're gonna follow me. That's what they did. Out Bonnie Bray, then right on University. Dell kept his eyes on Sonny's panel truck, the dull chrome of its bumper, the 2 squares of glass in its back doors. Well, I'm glad we can do this, Liz said. Yes, said Dell. It's the least we can do. His poor wife. Liz tilted her head to the side and held it there, Imagine having to lie on one side so long. I'd go nuts. Healing takes a lot of patience, Dell told her. I don't know if I could do it. You'd do it because you'd want to be you again. He was about to try to explain to her why he had shouted at the burglar the way he had. But then Sonny's panel truck slowed, and his turn signal started to blink, and Dell, who had gotten too close, had to slam on his brakes. Liz pitched forward and caught herself by grabbing onto the dash. Dell, she said, be careful. Sonny turned his panel truck into the lot of Elf Storage, and Dell followed because it was what he had promised to do. And from here on, he had decided he was going to be the kind of man people could count on. He remembered all the times he and Liz had driven by and joked about the missing S in the sign, and how one day, he couldn't recall when, they had stopped joking, the sign just as familiar as any other they expected to see. So now, it didn't seem unusual to be driving through the gravel lot, turning down an aisle flanked by rows of storage sheds with red section fronts that could be raised like garage doors. Sonny stopped his panel truck at the end of the aisle, got out, and came back to the car. He motioned for Dell to roll down his window. Sorry for the detour. Sonny rested his arms on the car door and leaned in toward Dell. I just happened to think I needed to load up some cartons of that mineral solution. Heavy suckers, Chief. Can you give me a hand? But your wife, Dell said. Will just be a minute. Besides, she's not going anywhere. Liz put her hand on the back of Dell's neck and stroked him the way she had always done when they drove home on Saturday nights after dinner and dancing and maybe a nightcap at Peg's piano bar. Sometimes he would take the long way home, down Riverside and out Belmead until it curved into Bonnie Bray, just so he could have her there beside him a few minutes longer, so he could feel her hand on his neck, breathe in the scent of her perfume, and catch from time to time the exciting glint of gold from a necklace or pendant or earring as the car slipped through the soft glow of the streetlights. Go ahead, Dell, she said. Take a look at Sonny's operation. It might be just the winner you've been looking for. Dell noticed she had picked up Sonny's soothing way of talking, and it filled him with a great hope. All right, he said, sure. Let's see what you got. At the storage unit, Sonny took the keys from his pocket and put the shiny gold one into the padlock. He yanked it open and then lifted the door. The sections clacked over the rollers as they folded and disappeared overhead. Step on in, Chief. Sonny smacked his hands together. Make yourself at home. Dell walked into the storage unit and let his eyes adjust to the dark. A dim glow from the vapor lights outside washed over the walls and the floor, and he could see the unit was empty except for an army footlocker at the rear against the wall. You told me there were cartons, Dell said to Sonny. Sonny chuckled. You fell for that, didn't you? I'm not surprised. I could tell right away you were that kind of dope. No body wraps? Dell said. I read about it in the paper. And your wife? Sorry, Chief. No wife. Dell heard Sonny pulling down the overhead door. The light faded and Dell stood there in the dark. Then he felt a sharp blade against his throat, and he knew it was the carpet knife he had seen on Sonny's dashboard. I want you to get down on your knees, Sonny said, and his voice was so gentle and kind. Dell felt a hand on his shoulder, pushing him down to the floor. I want you to stay there, just like you're praying. The knife blade came away from his throat, and he heard Sonny's footsteps on the cement floor. For a moment, Dell thought about trying to run. Nothing seemed as sweet to him then as the idea of him and Liz alone in their car, driving through the night. But then Sonny said, it's a hell of a story for a man's wife to tell on him. What was that noise you made? Like a cow? She made you out to be a fool. Don't hurt her, Dell said. Give me a break. The Foot Locker's lid slammed shut. I watched you when she told that story. You wanted her to pay. Dell bowed his head. Suddenly, he felt guilty, a criminal at heart. Since the night of the break-in, what he had wished more than anything was that Liz could know the same alarm that had overwhelmed him the moment he had seen the burglar come into their house. Then she would know why he had shouted. He had been afraid, yes, but more than that, he had loved the world too much to leave it. He had loved himself and Liz and the life, though imperfect, they had together. There had been no words for all this, only a fierce and strangled bawl. Now he heard Sonny moving toward him in the dark. Put your hands behind your back, Sonny said, and Dell did. He heard the ripping sound of duct tape unwinding from its roll, felt it sticking to the hairs on his arms as Sonny wrapped it around them where his wrists were crossed. There are people, Sonny said. He whispered it in Dell's ear. People like me. Dell imagined Liz waiting in the car. Sooner or later, she would hear the door to the storage unit open and see Sonny coming toward her. How long would it be before she would know she was in trouble? And once she did, would she call out? Would she say, Dell? Dell, he imagined her saying again and again, until it wasn't Dell at all, but a wail so high and thin it could barely hold the weight of such fear. At last, something private and intimate between them.